Hello, welcome to the CarCast+Edmunds podcast. I'm Matt, the moderator, Deandra, here with Alistair Weaver. How are you?
I'm back. I'm jet
You're
lagged.
back.
This is my first meeting in inverted commas back. So I've had 2 weeks in Europe. I woke up at 4:30 this morning, as did the rest of the family with a bit of jet lag, but I'm in good form. It's been a nice trip.
Yeah, tell us about it. Did you guys do any car stuff out there? I mean, you had family and
We
stuff with you, but
Apart from
they like
three hire
cars.
cars in three different locations, that was about the result of the car stuff. Actually, there was something to talk about on that because I experienced the first time the whole European rules about no they have this sent this we can get into it, but the long and short of it is every time you creep over the speed limit, even if it's a couple of miles an hour, every Peugeot hire car I was in Europe was starting to bing at me, which was driving me insane for two
That
weeks.
that was being proposed, I think, in California by somebody. Some legislation was saying they wanted some legislation saying we're going to limit, maybe not quite as strict or as sensitive as what you were driving, but there were certain rules about not 1 mile and over the speed limit, but a certain, I don't know, 5 or 10 over the speed limit, and then it gets progressively louder. But it's effectively like the seatbelt chime that if you're over the speed limit, it starts dinging at you. And yeah, that just made everybody go nuts as soon as they started reading that was a potential thing that we could get here. But you guys are saying it's there. You guys have it. It's fairly new, but you have it.
Yeah, so who's you guys? Yeah,
You guys.
I'm been
I
here
mean,
for
you
eight
haven't been
years.
there in 18 years or 15 years,
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years or something, but
It was so, but yeah. So this came in. I'm just looking at my little notes on it here. So it's called Intelligent Speed Assist System. It was introduced. I think it became mandated on July the 7th last year. So it's been in operation a year. But basically, what it means is different ways of doing it. It can either bing at you as you go over the speed limit. They can do like little haptic things like through the speed through the throttle pedal. So there's different options for the manufacturer, but you can turn it off. So basically, every time you get in the vehicle, you have to turn this thing off. And it's the same with lane change keep assist, which is also then mandated to be on. So it's almost like part of the startup procedure. You get in the car, you go into the menus, you turn this thing off, and away you go. Because the reality is, if you don't, like, I'm no advocate of like being stupid with speed in the wrong areas, past schools and everything else. But in my experience, like where I was driving, either in Mallorca, which is a little island off Spain, or in southern France, in wide open country roads, as soon as you get, just over the speed limit, let's say you're overtaking, or let's say you're just, it's just sort of drifting on, then this thing's buzzing and beeping at you. And your first instinct is to panic. What the hell's that? Something's going wrong. And so it just feels massively distracting. And the other thing that was driving me nuts is if you don't remember to turn it off as soon as you get in the car, you're then driving along and you're like, God, what do I do? And how do I turn this off? So then you're massively distracted going into the touch
yeah.
screen. You got to press about six different buttons to turn it off, including one that says confirm. So it was driving me nuts. It was also driving my wife nuts because every time it binged, I went nuts and she went nuts because I was going nuts. So I can't see it working in America. I just think that there's just be too much resistance to it. And a lot of
Yeah.
people in Europe are saying, "Is this the thin end of the wedge?" The technology is clearly there just to artificially limit cars. Now, there's a big safety argument for saying you shouldn't just limit the car to 40 miles an hour, and that's what it is if that's the speed limit. But clearly, a lot of people are saying, well, if you're sort of warning people, then the next step is to clamp down and enforce it. And what does that look like? And what does that look like for the freedom and all that good stuff? But it was kind of interesting to experience. And as I say, I set off, and suddenly the car was binging at me, and I hadn't got a clue what was going on. It took me a while to figure it all out and
Yeah.
start to kind of work around it. But it
And so
doesn't.
these were on new cars that you guys were renting,
Yeah, this is just rental cars. So I went
just
over to
rental cars.
just
And
rental cars.
I
Yeah.
guess rental fleets probably have them first because they, newish cars. Um,
But it's any car that's less than a year old, basically, now has this built into it. I
and
remember I did an Audi launch earlier in the year, and I had forgotten about it at the time, but that had the test cars that had the same system that you then had to go in and turn off the new A5.
and there's no there's no like there's no standardization on how to turn it off. Like we have the start stop feature now, which does annoy everybody. But now all the car companies have pretty much come up with like a button on the dash. There's still a few left that have it like in a menu on a touchscreen, but it's mostly a button on the dash. It's the same icon, and everybody can get in the car and just hit that and turn that feature off. We're not there yet with this annoying sort of dinging on your
I haven't read it.
your
Well, I
screen.
haven't obviously driven purely by chance. Every car I rented in Europe and the UK happened to be a Peugeot, which is part of Stellantis. If people want the history these days, but I don't know because I haven't driven enough of them. But I think the Audi system was different, and there are different ways in which you can approach this. So as I say, you can have this kind of like throttle pedal interaction. I think there's means in which you can actually start to slow the vehicle automatically. Yeah, there's all sorts of different ways of approaching it within the legislation, and Peugeot's obviously just going for a really
I
annoying Bing. So it is, think about it in US terms, it's like you try and drive off without your seatbelt on, and you get that bing, 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 and
yeah,
it just, yeah.
I think that would be a tough sell in America. I think people that bought new cars would start to do everything they can to hack the software or get into it or get, handheld tuners or like, force scan software or something like that, like all the Ford Lightning owners are getting and to do it. But I think it would go so far as to hurt sales of cars, of new cars.
Well, the thing is, I suppose in Europe, if everybody's got it, then it's not going to hurt sales because you can't buy a car without it. So, as
Yeah,
I
I just
understand it,
think
even if you
I,
buy a
I think
Ferrari,
there'd be a drop in sales overall, and people go, "This is just a little too much. I'm just going to stick to last year's model for a
yeah.
while." Maybe used car sales goes up, new car sales go down.
The other thing that was driving me nuts about this Peugeot is this. I grew up, so Peugeot is a really interesting brand. My first car was something called a Peugeot 106, which was this tiny by European standards, never mind American standards, this tiny little hatchback, no airbags, no ABS, 75 horsepower, didn't weigh anything, was really, really fun to drive. And Peugeot had this great reputation. There was a car from the 80s, which maybe the kind of a few European enthusiasts listening would remember Peugeot 205 GTI, and they really led the way. Volkswagen with the Golf GTI, Peugeot with the 205 GTI, really led the way in kind of like what we call hot hatchbacks, sport compacts over here. And the cars were designed by Pininfarina. They looked fantastic. They drove amazingly well, and they had a really fantastic brand. And then they just somehow lost their way in the kind of late 90s and then early 2000s. The styling went away. They weren't good to drive anymore. And they just kind of was like, what are they? What are they for? And it was kind of interesting to come back. It's probably a decade since I drove a Peugeot to go back into what they're doing now. And they've got quite extrovert styling, and that's quite appealing. But the driving dynamics were kind of okay, but nothing special. And just sort of the design details. It's a Stellantis product, and in Europe, Stellantis owns Peugeot, Citroën, so the French brands, Opel, which is a kind of German Opel, and Vauxhall in the UK, Fiat, obviously. So there's a whole plethora of brands like there is in the US. And I just kind of thought, why would you? I always think about every car that I get in. You always think, why would I buy this car? What's the reason you're selling me this car? And it was kind of hard to work that out. It wasn't that spacious. It was
Yeah.
reasonably stylish. The technology was a bit slow, in terms of the touchscreen and everything else. Everything was a bit slow to react. And then the most annoying thing of all, I drove the 308 wagon and the 3008, which is the SUV. Both of them had similar designs where the steering wheel interferes with the dashboard. So if you want to basically see how fast you're going or see how much fuel you've got to basically compromise your driving position. So for me, that meant putting the seat way higher than I wanted it, and then the steering wheel basically down in my crotch in order to be able to see basic displays. And you can tell that they screwed it up because it's a digital display, and one of the options is to give you a tiny little speedo right at the top right hand corner of the display, just where you can avoid the speedo. So it's really annoying. And
This
I
is
just can't. It's like one of those things where I see if you're watching on YouTube. So basically, the steering wheel just naturally interferes with the display, and I can't. It's one of those design things where you just think like, you do all this, spend all this money, you do all this ergonomics work. When you're designing these interiors, you have all these kind of virtual simulators now that they sit in and can look around even before they build anything. And it's like, how the hell do you design something where you cannot see, how much fuel you've got left or just basic
Yeah.
stuff because the steering wheel's in the way. And the only way to get round it is to end up with a really uncomfortable driving position that feels very unnatural. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, we were just looking at the SUV, the
Yeah, this is the
3008.
3008.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay, but and again, the challenge in Europe and particularly in the UK is there's all the Chinese brands piling in who are doing a good job, good product at a very competitive price. So if you're Peugeot, you've got to have some reason to buy them. And I think Renault's doing a great job with the Renault 5, the Renault 4, which is basically going back in history and creating these kind of retro EVs. And they look fantastic. And Peugeot's just like, what's the reason to buy one of these?
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't get into a car, even a high-end car. I can't get into a car without kind of reviewing it. It's bad.
Well, speaking of small cars, I have been driving the Toyota GR86,
Oh, it's a
and
great car.
it's been a minute since I've been in one. When they were launching them, I drove a couple, and the Subaru version, the BRZ. I don't know if they're still doing that partnership. I guess they still are for
Yeah,
now.
yeah. You can still buy a BRZ or the GR86.
But the GR86, they sent this the limited edition one, this Hakone
Yeah,
edition. Um, First of all, it looks good. Like they've kind of refined it and changed it over the years a little bit, little nip and tuck here. The one they sent over is this great green, bronze wheels, red Brembo calipers. It's an automatic, not the stick, but still fun to drive. You just kind of forget like a fun little sports car, how much fun it is. And then going from, an F-150 to that is first of all, you feel like you can't see as much because you're so low to the ground, but that's kind of normal with just like sedans and sports cars. And it's so tiny. It's like as you're driving, you're like, oh, I could park this anywhere. Like, this can go into any spot. This can go into basically the spot where you park a motorcycle. It just seems so small compared to the truck, but it's fun. I guess it has exhaust on it as part of this package. I think the package is mostly just sort of a cosmetic thing, maybe with the bigger brakes, but no real power.
right.
So it sounded fast without being fast. But I guess for the price point, that was kind of the idea, and the aftermarket can handle that kind of stuff. I know when the GR86 first came out, one of its flaws was just a very inexpensive tire with no real grip. And it's basically like the tires from a Prius. So the performance numbers around the track were weren't the best because it really just came down to the tire. It's like if you were gonna do something fun with this, uh, changing out the tires, which wouldn't be really expensive because it's not like it's 20-inch rims, would change all the numbers completely. So I don't know.
But I could go in the other direction, Matt, to be honest. Just to play devil's advocate for a minute. For me, I mean, what's it got? 228 horsepower, because I think it's the Subaru engine. It's a
Yeah,
2.4 boxer engine that goes into the Toyota, which is part of the reason it sounds so good. But part of the nice thing about not having too much tire is that you can actually have fun with it. And if you put loads of tire on it, you've just got loads of grip, and then it feels underpowered.
yeah,
So I always say, like, if you want a car, this is one of those cars, a bit like the Miata, which I suppose would be a rival, which are just really good and teach you about driving. But if you go for the stick version, which is a really nice manual gearbox as well, then don't put too much tire on it, and then you can actually, at a relatively safe speed, start to feel what the car is doing. I was just catching up on some of the stuff the team's been up to, and I was reading about our kind of Lamborghini Rebelto test, and the fact that it's just limits are so otherworldly on the road. Whereas this isn't. This is actually something. Don't put too much tire on it. You can actually have fun at a sane speed on a canyon road and actually start to feel what the car is doing. So I hear what you're saying, but I'd almost go in the other direction. It's not about
yeah.
going
Unless you're
fast, it's
adding
about having
power.
fun.
If you're in the aftermarket, adding supercharger, turbo, or
Yeah.
something like that, then then yeah, then I guess you can increase the grip a little bit. You
I
know,
think it's a
it's
really sweet little car. I mean, we had it at the test track. I think I was just looking at the numbers, and we did like 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, which,
okay.
these days isn't like, I think it was six dead, isn't like crazy fast, but at the same time, that's like fast enough, particularly if you get the manual and you're like changing gear and blah, 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 and it sounds good. Actually, as a little road car, I mean, a lot of people around me here in LA, everybody wants a 911 or they want this or they want that and they want a billion horsepower. But actually, I think you'd have more fun in one of these sometimes.
Interesting. We're looking at this photo right here. This profile right here feels a lot like a Lexus IS, right?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm same parentage.
Um, it's like 30 grand ish, 31,000. The one that I drove is 36,000. This is the Hakone edition. Some
It's
of these
got a cool
images.
like little ducktail rear wing going on as well.
Yeah, it does. It does. And this is the color combination that they sent me, this green with
I
the
think that's the only one. Hakone, in case you're wondering about, I've actually been to Hakone because my brother lived in Japan for a few years. Hakone is quite a cool ski resort. I went skiing in Hakone. Sorry, that's a bit look at me, but that's it's a ski resort. So I don't understand why they call it Hakone unless it's all to do with the mountain roads there. But yeah, it's a nice place.
yeah,
Skiing in Japan, surprisingly macho.
they didn't they didn't send the manual version. I think that would have been a little bit more fun. Although
It,
the automatic version is still fun and probably quicker.
it's
Uh,
it's a. I mean, I think that all the BRZ, they're both really fun cars. They're not that big, are they? I mean, the rear seat is kind of more for throwing occasional kids use or using as extra storage space. But it's a lot
yeah.
more. Although it's not a soft top like a Miata, it's a lot more usable overall than the Miata. You've got more space, you've got more storage space. If you don't really need if you think of it as a two-seater car with a bit like a 911, it's a two-seater car with a bit of extra versatility. And
So
we think the average car is 50 grand now. It's a lot of car for 36 grand.
the version I had has sort of a Alcantara trim up on top of the door, and it's got soft touch, armrests and stuff. But for the most part, everything else is just a lot of plastic all over the place. But not not so much in an uncomfortable way where you're going, oh, I just spent $60,000 and the interior's not there. I mean, you spent 35,000, and these days when cars are $40,000 and up on average, this feels like a lot for the money. Plus the fun factor is there, like we were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're after either like a fun, and probably for a lot of people, maybe it's a fun second car or even, dare I say it, like a third car, a bit of fun. It's not, yes, you can buy a Mustang for that kind of money, certainly in the used market, and you go faster and all the rest of it. But just as a car to teach you how to drive and just to have fun in. I mean, it's a bit like the Honda Civic, like something like the Type R, just really fun, like knocking around town. And,
Hmm.
every journey feels like you can be on it in a way that in most cars you can't.
And so last week before I got this, we went from the new Lincoln Navigator to this. So I went from the largest thing to the smallest thing. I'm pretty sure you could put the Toyota in the back of the Navigator. The Navigator was interesting. They keep trying to upscale it, so they do a nice job. They send you this black edition, black label, I think it is. And I got into it a little bit on, I think on last week on the podcast, but I I think they're upping the game on the luxury side of things, massaging seats and soft touch materials and things like that, and trying to up their game with the audio system, speakers everywhere, and that screen that goes completely across the dash. You were talking a little bit like on the Peugeot, you were talking about not being able to see the all of the gauges and stuff. You do have to kind of position yourself in the Lincoln in the right area to see that screen go across the dash if you want to see the speedometer and stuff. I kind of liked the screen. It gave you some things. a view of things that you wouldn't normally get to all the time. One of the issues with so many cars now is if you're switching between like your radio presets and CarPlay, well, CarPlay takes up the whole screen and you can't get your presets anymore. You can change your radio stations with your steering wheel controls, but you can't see any of the information and all that stuff on the screen. So a handful of cars, not many, that do have some sort of split screen fixes that issue. And in the Lincoln, because that screen across the dash has different sections that are divided out, you can have your CarPlay Apple Maps up on that big screen, and then in front of you on your touch screen, you can have the radio presets and stuff and radio information. So I don't know, it just seemed like it's easier to to use both when you can divide it. I think maybe the Ram truck with one of the screens or have one of the big screens allows you to do that. I'm surprised my Lightning doesn't. It has that massive screen in the
Yeah.
dash, and it doesn't allow you to kind of split it in half for like radio presets and the map. So I mean, one of those things. But talk about two different vehicles. I mean, the navigation, just lofty suspension, touchy brakes, a lot of nosedive. They're just trying to get you the nicest ride
It's a
possible.
truck. It's a truck, right? And also, it's a truck underneath. It's still an F-150.
Yeah, but for me, it would just seem like the suspension was really soft, like just constant roll and nosedive, and I don't know if it had an air suspension on it. I
Yeah,
didn't
I
get
think
the
it
full
does
specs
actually.
on. I
Yeah.
thought it did, and kind of a touchy brake that you get on it a little bit and it just nosedives down. So just kind of very grippy on the initial touch. Uh, anyway, very different vehicle for sure. But both of them I can see
You can see the appeal.
filling your
The
need.
Navigator just keep moving. Yeah, now it competes with the Escalade, but it keeps sort of, drifting that up market because obviously they've got the Expedition on the Ford side, so the Navigator's supposed to be more market. And I remember actually there's this
Uh,
time last year that they unveiled it at Car Week and they made a big play
Yeah.
about, the luxury and this whole, I don't know if they played around with it, that it can go into this kind of ambiance setting. So, it plays music and turns it into kind of woodland scenes and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Kind of a
Which
Zen
is
moment.
why I asked for it. I'm going up to Monterey Car Week again. I believe you're going as well. And I'm going to be doing some stuff with Lincoln, and I just haven't got a chance to get into it. And because they launched it last year, I wanted to get some seat time in the thing before we went up there so we can have some conversation about it. But yeah, they have a mode. I forgot what it's called. It's almost like a spa mode. And I was talking to them about it, going, like you can put it in a mode. It like reclines the seat, pushes the massage on, plays like this kind of aura-esque kind of spa music. And they were saying, well, in I believe in China where they sell it as a like a luxury vehicle, it's not uncommon for someone to like get home and before you like get into the house with the kids and everything, you spend 10 minutes just sort of relaxing, clearing your mind in the vehicle. And it
No,
kind
I
of has
get
like
that.
this spa mode.
I do you know what I do a similar thing sometimes when I get home, and again I know exactly what they mean because if I drive home from the office and then normally I'm doing calls the whole way, so
Yeah.
sometimes I've been like dealing with something, you stop outside, and then he's meant. There's probably a lot of dads and mums listening who are going to associate with this, but it's quite hard to go from that mode 10 seconds later into like dad mode.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes I sit in the car for 5 minutes and just like, look at Instagram or a little dopamine kick somewhere, go through mail, just like you need that little bit of transition. And that's something that's hard, like half the time I work from home, like I am now, and it's hard to then manage that transition. So I do get that, whether I would like go into full forest scene and sit in my Lincoln and I don't know. I mean, BMW and Mercedes do something similar. It felt like a gimmick. I don't know how much you'd really use it, but I don't know. It's what we talked about before as well, isn't it? It's like the
Yeah.
luxury brands is getting harder and harder to say I'm a luxury brand because everybody uses CarPlay, everybody does massaging
Yeah.
seats or heated seats or ventilated seats. So how do you differentiate an Expedition from a Lincoln? And that is just yes, it can be material choice, it can be a few little bits here and there, but it's kind of like you're getting into these sort of gimmicky things. It's like the Mercedes S-Class. Like
Yeah.
actually now a
So
lot of the stuff on it is a bit of a gimmick that you'll never use.
two of the things that that stood out to me that I just didn't care for at all is one, the AC vents. You can't get in there and just turn the AC vent because if it's like blowing on you or a gas, it's done on the touchscreen.
Oh yeah, I
You
hate
can't
that. Like
manually, and
Tesla
it's like
style.
you don't need to do that at all. You don't do that. And the other one was you can't change the mirrors. Like you just look to your left on the door. You're like, where are the mirror controls? How do we change the mirror? It's on the steering wheel controls and it's up on the touchscreen. And I guess when you get used to it, it's not awful. But I spent more time just sitting in it, going, I don't know how to change the mirrors. Like, where's the manual? I got to figure out how to do this. Just some things they put made electronic that you don't need to
Yeah.
have like touch
And
controls for.
Tesla does it to save money, but whether Ford's doing a similar thing, if you lose physical buttons, then you save some money. So
I
was
guess
it?
overall, this just seemed more complex and expensive, especially the AC vents. So, like, you're talking about a piece of plastic that you can move with your fingers. You added electric motors to it, and there's only like two modes. It's like blow air on you or blow air off of you. Like those are the only two modes. And don't get me wrong, I think AC vents are important to have like good feedback, just tactile feedback. I remember driving an Aston Martin and hitting the bumps here on the 405 where it intersects with the 10 like, and once I hit those bumps, the AC vents all flopped to the floor because they didn't have enough tension on them. And then when I drove the Jag, it has the sort of the round dial billet aluminum and it has a real smooth feel to it and lots of tension on it. I was like, that's a really nice AC vent.
The
Aston Martin, every time you hit a bump, the air just points to your to your,
the,
to your knees.
the I don't think you can hear my kids going nuts upstairs, by the way, but if you can, apologies. But it was the best one of any one of those actually was Saab. It's probably the reason they went bust or GM shut them down. But if you ever got into a Saab, it was like a joystick. And it was all
Yes.
this kind of little joystick under tension that you could kind of point it like northeast or and it was one of the coolest things. And then they always had those like cool cup holders and everything else, like massively over-engineered, which is probably why they no longer
I think
exist.
the
But
Jag one was like that. It was kind of, it looked like a turbine engine and it had like a
yeah.
knurled knob in the middle and
Oh, I remember, was
I
that the XJ one? Yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah,
the XJ.
it's
Yeah, I
it's
know.
definitely one of the Ian Callum ones, right?
Yeah, the XJ, that was the later. I got such a geek on it. Yeah, that was I remember that being the XJ. Yeah. I loved
Well,
it, but
it's
I
funny because
love
we're
that stuff.
talking about it because we remember it. We remember it in the
That's
actual.
right. And Bentley with the little pulley things
Yeah.
that you pull in and out, which is easier to do at that end of the market. And I remember talking to Mercedes people, and there's like, yeah, I mean, until you get to like Bentley money, it's
Yeah.
hard to do because you're just doing like a proper piece of aluminium which kind of comes in and out and is all nicely damped.
Mhm.
I remember years and years ago going to Ingolstadt to Audi and meeting the guy. It was a story. I can't remember what magazine it was for, but it was a story about the guy whose job it was to engineer the haptic quality of the switches. So this guy's life was dedicated to how an Audi switch feels,
Yeah.
and it was fun. I mean, he was a really nice guy, but like a guy that spends his life looking at switches.
Yeah.
And like I remember looking at all these little graphs about you have when you press a button, you have like an initial resistance, so you feel like you're pushing something.
Hmm.
Then it gives, and then it has to be damped in a certain way to feel quality. So if it's just like like a cheap button that just clicks, it's not good. You need to have a initial resistance, then a give, then a damped conclusion. And this guy was showing me he'd like bought all this stuff, and he was putting like things like Bang& Olufsen, who were high-end audio that they're very good at this stuff, and he was pulling them apart and saying, "Look, this is a metallic ball bearing in Bang& Olufsen, but it's really expensive, so I can't do that." And it was kind of fascinating. He showed like the depth that they were going to, and he was saying like when you get to Bentley money, yeah, you can use proper aluminium, so it feels cold and it's beautifully damped, so it comes in and out with the
Yeah.
same force. And Audi was somewhere in the middle, and how does an Audi switch differ from a Mercedes switch, and all this stuff that you never think about. But it's that I guess
Yeah.
touchscreens. Maybe he's out of a job now because it's like unfortunately, everything's just a big iPad.
Yeah, everything's on touchscreens and stuff now, unless he's doing it with touchscreens. Like, how is he doing the right
Who does somebody
feel?
does app was Volkswagen doing haptic? Which brand? I think it's Volkswagen does like haptic controls or Audi. Audi was doing it where you got like a little vibration when you
Yeah,
push
you
on
do.
it.
You get like a little pushback.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
it. Yeah. It
Um,
reminds me of a cheap BlackBerry I used to get before BlackBerry
yeah.
went down.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, so there was a big announcement from Ford this morning. I don't know if you, I know you were traveling, trying to get back and get on a reasonable actual schedule again. So I don't know how much you got into this, but it was teased as Ford's, modern day Model T moment for them, where they were sort of not just announcing a new car, but sort of the future direction of the company. Although this was all just sort of specific to EVs, what they're going to do in the EV. But interesting because you and I have been talking the past few weeks is when you start to take away tax incentives and you take away carpool lanes and you take away a lot of the things that got people into an EV, has there been enough EV adoption where people are like, this is the new norm? It's fine. It's not going to be 50% of sales for all the car companies, but it's just going to sort of settle around a 20 to 25% of sales. And it's just the new option. It's not here to replace things, but is the new option. But when you look at something larger, like an F-150 or an Escalade, you're kind of limited on where you can sell that thing, mostly North America, right? There's not a lot of, like you were just saying, you were in all over Europe, probably not a lot of Escalades rolling around out there.
No, most larger than most of the towns. Um, it was funny. At one point, I was following a Tesla Model S, and it was just so wide in Europe. It's just almost impossible on the kind of country lanes that you get in
Yeah.
France or Spain. But yeah, I was just looking. I had a quick look at it this morning before we came on air. I mean, like the numbers that Ford loses on EVs. This is actually from the New York Times, is saying that Ford's lost $12 billion, including 2.2 billion in the first half of this year. I don't care how big the company is. This is staggering sums, and this
Well,
is
they
the
had like record sales, but still a massive loss.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like if you look at EVs, I think in the first half of this year, that falls. I think they're just over 10%. They're down 10, 12%, something like that. They're falling. So it's really, everybody's sort of looking at it and saying, well, we're losing. And again, like somebody from Toyota is saying the same thing. We lose money on every EV we sell. And now with all the loss of incentives and everything else, everybody's just not sure how to jump. And EV's not going away, partly because of what's happening in the rest of the world with China and Europe and everything else. And I don't think it'll go away in the US, but it can't continue as it is because you can't keep losing a ton of money on every car you sell. So Ford looks like they're making a play to say, look, we've had this little skunk works operation going on, which they hired a guy called Doug Field to run their EV operation, who I spent some time with last year, and really interesting guy, worked at Tesla and other places. And I think what they said is we're going to have to go into the market and hire somebody who's really done this at a high level and give them the we talked about it probably on if you go back a year, we probably talked about this on the show. Actually empower them to rethink stuff because there's no point just bringing them into Ford and saying this is how Ford does things and this is how we've done things for like the last 120 years. If you're going to go to the market, spend a lot of money on some, high level executives that have really kind of been born in the EV market, you got to empower them to think differently. And it seems that that's what they've tried to do. They've gone away, they've taken a look at it. They've now got this new facility down in here in California, and it's all about how can we reinvent production and an approach to an EV. So that instead of selling it at a premium over a gas car, we're going to be able to sell it alongside a gas car at the same money or perhaps less.
Yeah, we also talked about companies trying to share costs by sharing a platform, like what GM is doing with Honda, for
Yeah.
example.
Although no
Um,
more, of course. I mean, they tried that and then they're not doing
yeah.
it anymore.
So what Ford is proposing is part of this announcement is Ford is saying we are developing or have developed an EV platform, and the first vehicle will be a smallish truck, an EV truck, a scaled down version of the Ford Lightning, somewhere in between like a Maverick or a Ranger. It'll have a truck bed, it'll have a frunk, the interior space of roughly a RAV4. And that's kind of the size. And similar features, it'll have Pro Power on board. You'll be able to, power your house for a certain amount of time. And this platform that they're building this off of will also underpin a small SUV, maybe a larger SUV, possibly even a sedan. And that's how they're going to share the cost for EV. I don't know if Ford is even going to do other versions of EVs like an F-150 unless this can be scaled up to that size. But this is the new EV platform for Ford products. Like this is it. And all basically coming out of the same factory, I think, is in Kentucky, if I remember that correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And it sort of makes sense. I mean, this is kind of what GM's been doing. Ford kind of did its own thing with the Mustang Mach-E, which then, weirdly didn't spin off a Lincoln or anything else. And then
Yeah.
obviously the F-150, the Lightning, as you well know, is just an F-150, simple terms, as an F-150 with batteries. So this is more akin to what like GM's done, where they said, right, we're going to build a platform strategy, and then we're going to spin it off for for Chevrolet, for Cadillac. I'm actually driving one of the Cadillacs up to Car Week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
We're gonna spin it off to Hummer and everybody. We're basically going to turn this into as many different vehicles as we can. We're going to amortize the cost across all these different brands. Ford doesn't have as many brands to do that with, but it sounds like a sensible policy. But it's just, can they get the costs? Does it work? Can they get the cost and the price down to make it competitive and still be profitable? And that's the big conundrum. And it's kind of reading some of the narrative around it. They're kind of saying, look, this is our best punt at it. We've gone away. We've ripped up the playbook. We're going to reinvent things. We're going to try and do it this way. Hopefully it'll work, We'll see. It reminded me a bit of like Slate. There's a lot of fuss around Slate, this $30,000 truck or $20,000 truck, which is
Yeah.
now the tax rebate's gone away, a $30,000 truck. And it seems that, they were trying to do a similar thing. Can we make things as modular as possible? Can we, how can we reinvent everything to cut costs? Now, they've done it by simplifying things and having like, one body that you then wrap and it's a different approach. Ford is basically trying to kind of reinvent how they make stuff. So it seems, I think it just seems something they've got to do, right? The Chinese have come in with a clean sheet of paper and are doing let's face it, I mean, you can argue about the state subsidies and whether it's fair competition, but you look at Chinese cars in Europe, they're good products.
Slate's modularity puts a lot of that into the hands of the consumer, going, you buy
Yeah.
you buy the base version of whatever, and then if you want to make it an SUV, you want to add radio, you want to add all this stuff. Well, Ford's modularity is more on the production side, saying, we've got sort of this chassis, if you will, and even then, I can't even say that that's the case. It is a unibody structure. The battery will be a load-bearing structure of the floor. So if they wanted a larger vehicle, I don't know if they just add more sheet metal to the unibody or make a larger battery to get more structure so you can get more range out of a larger vehicle. But they're going after cheaper, more efficient battery technology. That's a big thing. And their battery, again, talking about the cost savings, is you look at the battery technology in a Mach-E and you look at what's going on in an F-150, and I don't know if there's a lot of shared stuff there, but they're saying, no, we're developing a battery. It's going to be across all of our EVs, and that's how we're going to save battery costs, and we can maybe scale the battery a little larger or smaller. But they're also talking about the new assembly plant being the evolution of efficiency on the assembly line. They're saying what you see now, if you see any of the videos of like the Rouge plant or something like that, or F-150s being built, and the workers on the line moving things around with robots and cranes, moving a windshield, moving a big dashboard on an arm that goes through the door opening and into. They're like, we're not doing that anymore. Their assembly process is getting evolved to where they're not putting a dashboard through the door opening hole anymore on the assembly line. They're like it's a completely different type of process. I mean, to an extent, I don't I you'd probably have to see the whole process to go what's different. And they're touting, 4,000 employees to be working at this facility. But it also kind of makes you wonder, is 4,000 employees doing the job of 5 or 6,000 employees? Because I mean, looking at the UAW strikes and things like that, and how technology is becoming more advanced, I would say as a car manufacturer, you start to step away a little bit from having the most amount of employees possible. Like you start to go, well, you know, what sort of automation, what what's the right balance of union employees versus automation, right? You got to
Yeah,
have the
and that's
employees, there's contracts, there's agreements, but how much of that starts to get replaced by automation?
yeah, and the whole then you layer on the whole AI stuff and everything else.
Yeah.
It's a difficult conundrum, isn't it? I mean, I've seen this, with the kind of, there'll be union opposition if there's not if there's more automation and blah blah. But you got to find you got to find a way of cutting costs because at the end of the day, there if you're losing, you know, 4 billion a year or whatever it is in EV sales, that's not sustainable. And sooner or later,
Right.
the lesson of the British car industry was, oh, hang on, you get bad management plus union intransigence, and ultimately the whole industry collapses, which is exactly what happened. You just got to be realistic and say you can't keep losing billions and billions of dollars. So you've got to try something different. So yeah, it's tough, and nobody wants to see anybody lose their job and all the rest of it. But you do have to, unfortunately, the consumer is saying in America, we're just not willing to pay a premium for an EV. And I don't think that's going to change. So the only other way to sell EVs is to get the price down and make them competitive. Because EVs have a lot of technological advantages over gas cars and everything else. A lot more things you can do with an EV potentially, but you've got to make it competitive. I mean, I was just looking at the new, Charger, and they've got the inline six come out, which is going to be cheaper than the EV.
Yeah.
And the EV goes a bit faster in a straight line, but won't have the character, and nobody's going to buy the EV.
Yeah.
So
Already nobody's really buying it. So
already nobody's buying it. So, and that inline six is a fantastic engine. I've driven it in the Ram. So yeah, you've got to tackle this head on, and it's interesting. I don't think Ford's share price has moved in a positive direction. I think it's probably fairly early days, and everybody's kind of working out what this actually means. And is this just a bit of bluster? But you've got to rethink it. I think so. I think we'll be seeing Jim Farley, Ford CEO, this week up at Monterey, and you've got to do something like this. You can't just carry on
yeah.
doing things the way they are and losing billions of dollars. It's just it's game over.
And you're right. The when you look at what China is doing on their end, and it's been no secret. Like Jim Farley's been out there, he's been driving their cars, he's been driving them here, he's been looking at not just the cars but the whole process. So for him to come
Yeah.
back and go, we are behind, we're way behind on this. You
And
know,
Tesla, of course. I mean, Tesla has done an amazing job, really, of, there's lots of things you can, like or not like about the way they do business and everything else. But, at the end of the day, an incredible job of, building EVs and, at scale, and establishing themselves in the market. So, and Doug Field, who's now leading the Ford operation, is ex-Tesla as well. So there's a lot of learnings. You got to look at what China's doing, look at what, Tesla's done. And if you're Ford, you've got to say, well, we just can't keep doing the same thing.
you
It
can't.
doesn't.
And any other sort of standalone EV manufacturer, Rivian, Lucid, Scout that's going to be coming out.
Yeah.
It's like, although they're going to have some sort of hybrid version or range extender, not everything can be a luxury brand. Like like everything is now because it's expensive to make those
Yeah.
vehicles, but everything can't be 80, $90,000. Like it's just, that can't be
No,
the
I mean
new
the
norm.
average car transaction is about 50 grand at the moment, a little bit more for EVs, and it's too much. People can't afford
Yeah.
it. Interest rates are still, despite the president's posturing, interest rates are still pretty high. Affordability is still a concern. So I think the sentiment behind this is spot on. And, if they can execute on it, then it could, it could shift the market because certainly like a Maverick Ranger sized truck, EV truck with a reasonable range and a lot of like the pro powers and all the rest of it, which makes those trucks really usable. I could see
Yeah.
that actually having a good
And
existence at a sort of 40 grand price point.
and they're saying closer to 30 as the base.
Yeah.
So,
So
people will option them up and probably get closer to
yeah,
40, but it also has to be something that is sized and can arguably be a global truck, right? They can't, I
yeah,
mean, maybe, I guess we can find out, next week or so, when we talk to Ford people, is this intended to be, in other parts of the world?
yeah. Because Ford has a couple of EVs, Puma and the see the Explorer EV in Europe that we never see that
Yeah.
they're not even trying to sell in the US.
Yeah.
So they've got this to call on as well. So we have a very kind of I mean this is one of the things the US market is becoming so distinct to everything else in the world, and that's a big problem.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna be wheels up soon. You're heading up to Car Week. I'm gonna head up Wednesday. Actually, as we're listening to this, I don't know when this show is gonna come out. This might come out after we've been to Car Week. We've got a few shows in the can, so trying to prep for that trip away. So yeah, I'm saying I'm heading up to Car Week, but by the time you're listening to this, I should be going. Car Week was fantastic.
Well,
Everything went exactly as planned, and we made it back safe and sound.
or we run the show today and we're still heading. But yeah, I'm heading up on Wednesday, or did head up on Wednesday. So I'll be there Wednesday through Sunday. It's just a great. It's just got grown in scale, and it's just more got for somebody like me who needs, kind of wants to go and shake a few hands and catch up with everybody. It's become more and more important. So
Yeah,
I'm heading up there with Cadillac. We're driving some Cadillac and driving some Corvettes, and there'll be a ton of stuff going on. So
awesome.
it's the only time that I get to wear these days where I get to like, put on an old jacket and, I've got my shirts and, my button downs in the washing machine, and I get to dust down the pants that I wouldn't normally wear.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you up there.
All right, mate. You
Yep. See you
can
up there. All right, guys.
give me some free
Thanks.
champagne on Friday.
Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I keep the air in the spare in the bag of the wheel.